medical devices and pharmaceutical products for diabetes make more money when more people have diabetes. 80 to 90% of their funding comes directly from medical device or pharmaceutical companies. Shockingly, when I was working for Coke, we funneled millions of dollars to the American Diabetes Association. You have 33% of young adults having prediabetes. That was unthinkable a generation ago to see, a diabetes doctor seeing one child with diabetes. Now, the 66% of adults in America have prediabetes. You don't have diabetes, you will have almost a 0% chance of having Alzheimer's, which is now called type 3 diabetes. You have a very limited chance of having, heart issues. Many forms of cancer are highly tied to blood sugar dysregulation diabetes. We aren't told this. You would think that the American Diabetes Association would be, of course, trying to stop diabetes, trying to keep people healthy. There's not a single product that is more responsible for this explosion of metabolic dysfunction among the American people than liquid sugar. One 20-ounce bottle of Coke is more sugar than a child ate on average 100 years ago in the entire year.
I think a great place to start is for you to go into where you came from and your experience, because it's really led you on a very interesting path, but has given you a lot of knowledge that people really need to know.
Yeah, so I started my career in politics, and that was my dream. It was to help U.S. competitiveness. And went out to Stanford with my sister. She was the pride of the family, a doctor. I was studying economics and politics, and then did campaigns. And what I quickly learned is that bipartisan, people I was on the other side of the aisle from, immediately when the campaign's over, they work for two industries in DC. They work for the pharmaceutical industry and they work for the food industry. So almost immediately, like everyone in the political world, I was pulled into consulting, lobbying for pharmaceutical companies. They spend 5 times more on lobbying and public affairs than the oil industry. Almost immediately was working for opioid companies. So this was like 2011, and the opioids were the order of the day. I was very surprised. As a junior employee, I had lists of doctors from Harvard, from Stanford, and it was a donation strategy. So medical research donation strategies were coming from a public relations office in Washington, D.C., which was very surprising. And I was actually interacting with leading pain specialists. And what we did was we funneled money. So the dean of Stanford Med School at the time, a man named Philip Pizzo, actually the guy that was there when my sister was at Stanford Med School, who was a pain specialist. And so we actually maneuvered to appoint him to a panel on the NIH to set guidelines. And at the exact same time, gave him a $4 million grant to study opioids. And we did that to where 90% of the panel he then appointed had direct both research grants and just direct bribes, direct consulting payments from opioid companies. That produced in 2012 an unimpeachable NIH from the dean of Stanford Med School on down report saying that opioids weren't addictive and that pain is a crisis. It didn't focus on the harm of opioids. It focused on that we have to attack this very aggressively whenever someone's in pain. And that, unfortunately, document has blood on it. That has directly led to hundreds of thousands at least of unnecessary deaths. But that's what I saw. It's the rigging of institutions of trust. And it was surprising to see that at the highest level, these institutions are for sale. Pharma, when my sister was at Stanford Med School, somehow touches over 50% of the Stanford Medical School budget through these research grants, through direct funding. That's the lifeblood of medical institutions, is research grants. That comes from pharma. And that then leads to Casey's curriculum at Stanford Med School being, she calculated, 90% on pharmacology. Not one nutrition class. She got a diploma at Stanford Medical School without a single nutrition class. So it was just very interesting for me. And admittedly, it's taken a while to put these pieces together.
Right.
But you have systematic rigging of institutions of trust, even unimpeachable institutions like the NIH, Stanford, Harvard on down, with money to get the right result. And then in the next meeting, you're meeting with food companies, and you're doing the same type of thing. And a big project I was working on was actually working for Coke, steering money to civil rights groups to say that it was actually racist to remove soda from food stamps. This was obviously being questioned, and they weaponized the debate. They racialized the debate. They said if you take that choice away from kids, you're committing racism. And to this day, 10% of all SNAP food stamp funding goes to soda. Putting this piece together and why I'm on this mission and kind of what my life's calling is trying to articulate from my experience and trying to push forward proactive solutions to this devil's bargain where food is making us sick, our compromised food supply, It's just that simple. 9 out of 10 leading causes of American deaths right now are tied to preventable conditions that are basically foodborne. And it's a devil's bargain because there's not only silence from the medical system of why we're getting sick, there's actually complicitness. There's actually partnerships between the ultra-processed food industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And the healthcare industry has now become the largest and the fastest growing industry in the country while producing worse outcomes because every institution, from a medical school to a pharmaceutical company to hospitals to insurance companies, make money when more people are sicker for longer periods of time, and they lose money when we're healthy.
Well, it has
That's
to go
the
hand in
problem.
hand, right?
Yeah.
The food is making us sick, and then you need Big Pharma.
Right.
So are they in cahoots together, working together, or how do they interact?
Well, think about the American Diabetes Association. So these medical associations are actually unique entities in America because they're third-party groups. They're able to take outside funding, but they actually set the standard of care. So if you go against the American Diabetes Association's guidelines, you're at risk of losing your medical license. They set the standard. The American Diabetes Association, if you go to the website today, to their donors, they're totally outside funded. Every single brand on that website is either a medical device or a pharmaceutical company. Medical devices and pharmaceutical products for diabetes make more money when more people have diabetes, fundamentally. So 80 to 90% of their funding comes directly from medical device or pharmaceutical companies. But shockingly, when I was working for Coke, we funneled millions of dollars to the American Diabetes Association.
Of course.
So any American sitting back,
It's a great job security.
it's amazing.
It's important to me that the supplements I take are the highest quality. And that's why for 2 years, I've been drinking AG1. Unlike many supplement brands, AG1 is researched and developed by an in-house team of scientists, doctors, and nutritionalists with decades of experience in their respective fields. So many people have asked me if AG1 is actually the real deal. And trust me, there's a reason why I've been drinking it every morning for so long. Quality for AG1 isn't just a buzzword. It's a commitment backed by expert-leading scientific research, high-quality ingredients, industry-leading manufacturing, and rigorous testing. At each step of the process, AG1 goes above and beyond industry standards. I know I can trust what's in every single scoop of AG1 because of this meticulous process they go through. Taking care of my health shouldn't be complicated, and AG1 simplifies this by covering my nutritional bases and setting myself up for success in just 60 seconds. AG1's ingredients are heavily researched for efficacy and quality. And I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut health. I partnered with AG1 for so long because they make such high quality products that I genuinely look forward to drinking every single morning, first thing in the morning. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D plus K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription at drinkag1.com/prettyintense. That's drinkag1.com/prettyintense. Check it out.
So any American, right, looking at what's happening with diabetes, you have 33% of young adults having prediabetes. That was unthinkable a generation ago to see, a diabetes doctor seeing one child with diabetes. Now 33% of young adults have prediabetes. At a recent report said up to 66% of adults in America have prediabetes. This is the scourge of our country, and really the blood sugar dysregulation, it's the underlying cause of many other comorbidities. If you don't have diabetes, you will have almost a 0% chance of having Alzheimer's, which is now called type 3 diabetes. You have a very limited chance of having, heart issues. Many forms of cancer are highly tied to blood sugar dysregulation diabetes. We aren't told this, but diabetes is really the underpinning. You would think that the American Diabetes Association would be, of course, trying to stop diabetes, trying to keep people healthy, right? There's not a single product that is more responsible for this explosion of metabolic dysfunction among the American people than liquid sugar. This is like an IV liquid form, particularly fructose, which is particularly problematic, going straight to a child's bloodstream. 1 20-ounce bottle of Coke is more sugar than a child ate on average 100 years ago in the entire year. Oh. So it's going in liquid form directly to their bloodstream, obviously causing this cascade of metabolic issues. Instead of speaking out against that, instead of saying, let's not necessarily ban Coke, but kids shouldn't be encouraged to drink it, they're accepting money from Coke, and they had cans of Coke on their website, new small cans Coke was making as a recommended good thing for diabetics to do is do the new small can of Coke. Yeah.
I mean, the food pyramid, bizarre food pyramid thing or recommendation list that came out sometime, I think it was last year, talking about like, you know, steak being at the bottom and there being like, I don't know, Fruit Loops was up high and maybe, I don't know, maybe watermelon might have been one of the healthiest things up the list. But I just remember seeing this thing and I was like, this is absurd.
Right.
Do you remember what I was
Yeah,
referencing?
yeah,
It
no.
was like such bizarre things.
It was called the Food Compass. And this was a joint study from the NIH. And you got to understand, the NIH is just a grant-making organization. So everything the NIH does is just partnering with illustrious institutions. So the NIH gave $3 million to Tufts Nutrition School, which is considered the top nutrition school in the country. And jointly funded with that study was millions of dollars from other food companies and Tufts Nutrition School itself. Its lifeblood of funding is big food companies. So my partner and I actually wrote a blog post about this study. So I want to be clear. It has the NIH seal on it, Tufts Nutrition School. Okay, it's heralded in a press release with the NIH as the most comprehensive nutrition study ever conducted. And the press release said that the point of the study is to impact childhood nutrition marketing guidelines. As you said, it says that Lucky Charms were healthier than beef. It said that Honey Nut Cheerios were healthier than eggs. The Cheerios, just whole grain Cheerios, were rated as high as quinoa as a whole grain.
Oh my God.
And chocolate almond milk was rated higher than grass-fed milk. That's the type of study you had. Now,
did you see the Kellogg's thing that just came out?
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild.
Kellogg's lobbying for cereal for dinner.
So this is where this is what I want folks to understand. When you hear this study saying that cereal is better than beef, it sounds ridiculous. What we did working for the food companies is you fund these studies because the second it's published, you can then go create public policy. So you can then go argue that cereal can be subsidized for dinner. You can then go argue to schools that not only should they have cereal instead of eggs for breakfast, they can have them for lunch, that it's part of a nutritious diet. This all sounds ridiculous, and there was a lot. My partner and I, did a blog post. Joe Rogan retweeted it, and actually, the dean of the school called me from Davos, fuming, saying, "Why are you spreading?" He called me from Davos, and he said, "I'm just, we're just entrepreneurs, just kind of like tweeting some stuff." He's furious, trying to put a lid on it, saying this is misinformation. I'm like, well, what exactly is misinformation? Where in the study did you not say this? It's explicit. He's like, well, you're taking it out of context. The food companies are not taking this out of context. The second they get a study saying, I think there were 30 cereals on this list that were highly recommended, that highly nutritious, they then take that and get prisons, get schools, get hospitals. You go to any hospital, they're serving these cereals. It's propped up by the medical research. So now that leads to this environment. Food companies, yes, where the CEO of Kellogg is bragging that Americans are getting so hard hit by inflation, that it's a positive boon for the business that American families are eating cereal for dinner. They are also running an ad on children's television with Toucan Sam and Tony the Tiger bursting out of a closet. This is true. They're bursting out of the closet as a family is about to eat a chicken dinner. And the chicken turns into a cartoon and says, "Oh, thanks for saving me, Tony." And it's like, Tony's like, "The chicken can have the night off. Let's do cereal." That's an ad that's running nationally on children today, on children's television.
Stress is a common factor that affects everyone in today's fast-paced world, leading to various issues. What if the answer to better stress response is in a key ingredient? I'm talking about magnesium. Actually, I'm specifically talking about Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers. This one-of-a-kind product is designed to reverse low levels of magnesium, which could be leading to a multitude of health problems. What sets Magnesium Breakthrough apart is its ability to support healthy levels of stress hormones like cortisol, a better balanced stress response in your nervous and hormonal systems, and a healthy production of GABA, the relaxing neurotransmitter leading to a more peaceful and better flow state. That's why I recommend Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers. It's the only organic full spectrum magnesium supplement that includes 7 unique forms of magnesium for stress resilience and better sleep, all in one bottle. Simply go to bioptimizers.com/Danica. In addition to the discount you get by using promo code Danica10, there are always amazing gifts with purchase. Go now to bioptimizers.com/Danica to get your Magnesium Breakthrough and find out this month's gift with purchase.
By the way, Fruit Loops, which contain artificial coloring that are universally regarded as carcinogens and neurotoxins that are banned in every other country. In any other country you go to, the Fruit Loops don't have the ingredients that we have in America because of these studies, because of these aggressive studies that are funded by the food companies to cast doubt on the harm of these ingredients.
Europe doesn't even accept a lot of our food. They won't. I spent a bunch of time in Europe last summer, and somebody was saying that there's plenty of stuff that tries to come in, but it doesn't like meet regulations for them, and they don't accept it into the country because of, there's a great girl on Instagram, Food Babe is what she goes by, and she does the comparison of international versus domestic foods, packaged foods, and looks and shows the ingredients list and just how much different it is, basically how much bigger it is here.
Well, right before I came in here, actually, I was talking with Vani, Food Babe.
Really?
And,
wow.
and she's a real hero.
Oh, yeah.
And I would just say there is help coming. What these companies are doing is illegal. There's a legal route. Pushing these products on children that have known harmful ingredients that Europe will not even allow in the country. The fact that they have not even fought Europe and taken those poisonous ingredients out and then still push them on American children and market them to American children, that's negligence. It's negligence, and the legal route is a very appropriate route to take these folks on. I think this discussion is really important, and I think people are waking up. I mean, you listen to any podcast that's popular, it's talking about metabolic health, it's talking about our food. You're not hearing that on the news, which also, by the way, we helped fund when I'm working for food and pharma companies. The news is 60% funded by last count by pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, yeah.
They're not curious.
So is
about,
the NFL now.
Oh, that's a whole nother. We're not hearing curiosity on some of those mainstream outlets about the ingredients in our food, about this study from Tufts. That's only happening with independent media, and you're definitely not hearing curiosity about why so many people are becoming metabolically dysfunctional. So I think there's clear illegal stuff happening here, but yeah, I would say that a nutrition study, and this is frankly a key message my sister and I try to promote, and I think something that's actually hopefully empowering, is you should not trust nutrition studies. We are born with an innate understanding of what's good for us. Most animals are. Humans are one of the only animals in the world that is systematically obese or metabolically dysfunctional. Humans and animals we've domesticated, quite frankly, and feed them food. There's no obesity crisis among giraffes. There's no obesity crisis among lions in the wild. Where we've gone wrong is an industry that's predicated on the food side of getting us, frankly, addicted and serving us cheap food, and then the healthcare industry that profits. So there was 50,000 nutrition studies created in the last 2 years. I would say almost every single one to a study is marketing for ultra-processed food. There's no reason to fund studies that say you should eat pasture-raised meat or eat broccoli. The only reason we fund studies is to say that this ultra-processed addictive garbage is better than beef or better than broccoli, and to seed confusion.
Did the alternative meat look, I had a moment in my life where I was like, I watched What the Health.
Right.
And I was like, wow, this rocks my meat eating world. And so then I ended up eating like no bird meat, like very little like beef, almost all just fish. And it was only at night. Like I would make it through the day with just generally plant-based foods. So I'd like fake eggs. And then I tried tofu, that didn't work for me. Protein substitutes, pea proteins, and then fish. And look, I ended up sick. I ended up sick. And I had mercury poisoning, I had gut issues, and it was all because I was definitely convinced back in 2017 of the fact that meat was bad. And then I was like, is protein even really that important? Is this just, is this propaganda that we just need protein? Maybe we really don't. Our body makes whatever it needs, you know? Kids get big and tall on fruit roll-ups, you know? But I totally fell into it. And you're right, we don't know what to believe anymore.
Well, this is something we talk about in the book, and I'll just we use this analogy. So if you have 2 glasses of water and one had arsenic in it, you would know, you'd be able to separate the water from the arsenic, and you wouldn't drink the arsenic water. You just understand that. With food, we get in these tribes, we get in these we actually have an inability as humans to think about what the components of the food is. Like think about if you have 3 pieces of beef in front of us, like fake beef, the lab grown or the beyond, the fake ones we're talking about, a grain-fed beef and a grass-fed beef. Well, the grain-fed and the grass-fed have completely reverse ratios of omega-3 to omega-6 fats. Until very recently, the cows only ate the grass outside and were pasture raised. And that completely impacts the genetic makeup of the cow itself.
Sure.
And it's omega-3, which are anti-inflammatory fats, come from the grass. Now the GMO corn and soy and all this crap that we're feeding them in industrial farming, it actually totally changes the genetic makeup, from omega-3 to omega-6. So you have a significantly higher degree of inflammatory components of the grain-fed. It's totally different, almost meal. And then I was on the same track too, and Casey and I were both on more of a vegan train around that same time. And on the fake meat, right, that was billed as a great thing. But what is that? It's GMO, glyphosate-laden
ingredients
pea,
list is this long,
and then it's canola oil. So canola oil is a industrial byproduct that should not even be legal. That was literally lobbied by the oil industry because it's a byproduct of oil production.
Rockefellers back in the day, right? They need something to do with it.
Exactly, it's a byproduct of industrial manufacturing. They found that they could lobby and actually put it in food, and because it's so cheap, it's become the top source of American calories. If we're gonna when we unpack this, and then 30 years from now, I think glyphosate's a huge issue, but a huge way where we lost our way, and something we will look back on with shame, is seed oils. Again, soybean is the top single source of calories. Soybean oil is the top source of calories on the American diet. Get the dietary philosophies off the table, because it actually just asks the wrong question. If you have poorly treated animals that are loaded with hormones and loaded with antibiotics and fed a crappy meal inside in chronic stress all day, which absolutely goes to the genetic makeup of that food, that's a lot worse, right, than eating, a plant that's organic. It's like, it's not vegan versus carnivore versus whatever. It's what are we putting into our bodies. And the other thing I think where we lose our way with the dietary philosophies personally is that regenerative farming, I think, is absolutely what's going to have to save this country. Where we've lost our way is the monocropping, is getting things in the industrial, where we have to build things in lanes, for the mechanization,
for the
and we have to keep
factory farming.
Something most people don't realize is that if you get back to regenerative farming, where there's diverse ecosystems where animals are actually fertilizing the plants,
cover crops,
it produces natural, as we farm forever, pests, natural ways to keep out pests. So you don't eat glyphosate. You actually get a higher per acre output than industrial farming. We only do industrial farming for the efficiency. But with AI, maybe robotics, we can actually the labor is the problem, but we can actually probably solve that. But our soil is getting destroyed from the industrial farming. Our soil, a tomato is 70% less nutrients and some key nutrients than a tomato grown in the U.S. just 50 years ago.
Well, and they say that's less satisfying too. When
it tastes terrible.
when you're hungry, you're not always just hungry for food. You're hungry for nutrients, really. And so when you eat like an apple that was used to be this big, it had 4 times the nutrients than the one that's this big and filled with sugar and water.
That's the key point. Don't see just the name of the food in front of you. You need to be matching our nutrient needs to the food in front of us, and we've just been lost from that. But we have to look at what's in our food and go on a treasure hunt. We talk about this in the book. It's just like we have to match our biological needs to the things we're putting in our body. I think we've kind of been tricked, right?
Yeah.
And we've kind of been divided. We've been divided with the nutrition studies. We've been divided by the dietary philosophies. I really don't care if someone's vegan or carnivore. It sounds like you and I have been on these journeys.
Yeah.
But at least being on a path of curiosity, of starting to learn what our nutrient needs are, starting to learn the crucial importance between omega-3 and omega-6 fats, just to learn what seed oils do to our bodies. You can start actually matching our needs. And again, Casey, my best friend, my inspiration, my co-author in the book, was a militant vegan, and now is almost in completely the other side. I mean, these things are journeys, but the true, I think, moral argument for me about this whole thing is that the regenerative farming, like natural, that's how things have been done forever. Like this ecosystem with the animals.
We've accelerated the deterioration over the course of factory farming in the last, 50 years, 100 years, as opposed to the thousands of years that were before it of people still eating food, but not having the same problems that we face now.
100%. 100%. Yeah, so we just can't get divided by the dietary. I actually, working for the food companies, it's not that hard to stoke confusion and controversy. The food companies actually fund influencers with a conscious purpose of confusing people on what's
Lizzo's
right
getting
to eat.
paid?
What?
Lizzo's getting paid?
I think you could probably trace food money to her.
I mean, it's interesting because the body positivity thing has been a thing where it's like, be proud, and you know, everyone that stands out against it and says like, no, this isn't, and which I'm not gonna lie, I agree. You shouldn't be happy and proud to be 50 plus pounds overweight. That's not good for you.
So here's what I think is happening. Let's go step by step. The system has been rigged. So I'm a very libertarian guy. I'm a personal responsibility guy, but I don't think it's actually Americans' fault.
Yeah.
All you have to do to unpack that argument is move to Europe or look at kids. So you go on those harrowing stats again, right?
Yeah.
That 6-year-olds, it's something like 20% are obese. That teens, 50% are overweight or obese. You know, the fatty liver disease, this is something no doctor used to see in anyone other than elderly alcoholics, but 25% of teens having fatty liver disease. So you look at that, and is that personal choice? Are parents trying to do that to their kids? There's clearly something systemically really wrong that's changed. And then you get to adults where 80% now in America are overweight or obese, and it's uniquely happening in America. So what's happened is that's been very systematic. That's very good for the food industry. It's good for the medical industry because there's a lot to intervene and solve then. And then what the food industry does to protect that is they directly pay people to say that you're a bad person for commenting on anyone's health or weight. So on TikTok, this came out. Anahad O'Connor in the Washington Post, an amazing reporter, actually traced nutritionists, undisclosed payments, millions of dollars on TikTok, shaming doctors for weighing patients, shaming nutritionists, saying there's no such thing as bad food. The only bad food has mold on it. Saying all of these messages, saying weight and obesity off the table, and that's happened in the past year. Direct payments from food companies. You can't even make this up. But the LA Unified School District partnered with an influencer who was also undisclosed, paid by Nestle. And they ran a video on the LA Unified School District, you know, responsible for millions of kids, saying that it's racist to talk about weight. And they had two people, the influencers, and somebody was going to eat a donut, and somebody's like, "Oh, what are you?" And it's like, "No, you can't shame me for eating a donut. There's no such thing as bad food." This was propagated by an influencer paid by food company on a school district's Instagram. Like, that's how they're systematically trying to get, you know, in addition to the body inclusive groups, any group that's trying to weaponize any argument that shuts up debate, whether it's throwing out racism, where it's calling you anti-woman, anti-whatever, there's most likely a corporate interest there. And I got to say, these are just not that impressive PR executives in DC. They understand how to rig the debate. You know, nobody wants to be called a racist. Nobody wants to be called sexist. Nobody wants to be called fat phobic. I'm optimistic that maybe we're getting towards, you know, a world where more and more people are speaking out, and that has a less of a tendency to shut down debate, but still very powerful.
Are they breaking any rules by paying people to say a certain thing? Is there fault to be had, or is it illegal? It's
a great question. A friend of mine, Courtney, who goes by Real Foodology, is like viciously attacked. She's a health influencer and really mission-based woman who does incredible work. And there's been just pitchforks among all these dietitians on TikTok for her, just like really, really maliciously making fun of her and calling out her credentials. And it turned out with this Washington Post article that a lot of those people that had pitchforks out for actually were coordinated and paid in a secret way, in an undisclosed way, to call her out and call out, frankly, any health influencer who talks about the importance of eating whole food. It's just systematic attacking, using charges of being elitist, right? Again, let's just unpack this. we've made the system where 95% of agriculture subsidies go to propping up ultra-processed food, where Coke is cheaper than water at a supermarket because it's so subsidized, where we've created through corruption this thing where it's cheaper to buy something in a bag than a whole avocado or something. And then they fund nutritionists to say it's elitist to tell, to tell lower income kids or whoever that we should get back to a whole foods diet. They're actually funding people. So this came out. I've actually been chatting a lot with some of these influencers. It is illegal. It actually is illegal for food companies undisclosed to pay nutritionists, registered dietitians and nutritionists, to do their bidding. That actually, according to FTC laws, should have been disclosed more. When those nutritionists in mass and a coordinated way were taking money and attacking people, telling kids to eat whole foods. So there's a potential legal route there. And it's something we're trying to do. Again, my life's mission. We've got a company trying to attack these incentives, but it's how can we use these basically levers that have been used against us to punch back, to frankly inflict some violence on these companies, in response to the violence they've committed against kids. But I think there is
social against social, meaning if you're going to use these influencers, we're going to do the same thing to say what you're doing is wrong, it's illegal, you're going behind the curtain, paying people off, you're doing the same thing to correct them.
Influencers, but also that's turning into legal action. I'm working on several actual legal responses.
Is Bobby Kennedy involved in some of that stuff? He's used to going after the big guys,
He's been. There's this beautiful coalition. I'm just so happy to be part of this. I was inspired by Casey. Casey was inspired by Mark Hyman and other warriors who've written about these issues for the past 15 years. I think this courage and the bravery and the message is really spreading. And there's this beautiful coalition of folks together. RFK, the campaign reached out. I'm talking to him on Thursday. He's been a warrior. People across the political aisle. I was just in DC last week, meeting with senators from both sides. And I think this is the key bipartisan issue in the country. I mean, fundamentally, you take a kid, they're being poisoned. Like fundamentally, when you look at the stats, mental health, 40% of high school seniors qualify as having a mental health disorder. It's all connected. It's all going up at once. Cancer rates are exploding among kids, diabetes, heart disease, ADHD, autism, everything. It's all going up all at once. So it's like bipartisan, like this issue. It's obvious what's happening. It's manifestly clear that there's only a couple variables that have changed, that are very like obvious and changed for everyone. Food is a huge one, but metabolic habits in general, we could talk about others. I think this has always been an issue on the left to care about, food and really metabolism and skepticism about pharma, but it's very much taking hold on the right now. So there's actually among voters, and I think the American people, there's a huge actually bipartisan agreement. Unfortunately, for some reason, I can give you the reason, because pharma is the single greatest payer of political donations, research donations, civil rights groups donations, media contributions to ads, they've just fundamentally bought off both sides. So you have the elites as referees for the pharmaceutical industry about this coalition. So there's it's been amazing that prominent lawyers have reached out trying to do lawsuits. Members of Congress have DM'd me and my partner, and we're meeting with them trying to think about solutions. We're working with regulatory agencies. So I really do think the cavalry is coming. I'm really trying to hammer on the high level, but I think the most important thing is that the bottoms up, the conversations you're convening across independent media are leading people to wake up.
I'm curious your thoughts about, you were in DC, you're talking about a bipartisan union essentially on this issue being a big issue. I would say that politics is new for me, but one of the big observations I've had, and something that I've felt for myself, is just how, a divide and conquer, but not like in a powerful way, but like in a lose power way. And so I wonder what your thoughts are around even having two parties or three, but the third is really an independent that is just listen to them talk and hear what they have to say. But in your experience of being in DC and going on both sides of the aisle, do you think that there's a future for partisan politics at all? And what is its role?
I would even push back on the premise that we have two parties. I think we have one party. honestly. I think
Which is
we have corporate control of our system. I think kleptocracy. We have. I call it a kleptocracy. I think we have. People with healthcare talk about, Medicare for all this. We have worse than socialized healthcare. We have a kleptocracy where the largest industry in the country has bought off every institution and has propagated a system that literally is incentivized for every kid to be sick. Because with chronic diseases, again, and the key point here, it's chronic conditions. That's 90% of medical costs. There's nothing more profitable than a kid getting on a pharmaceutical chronic disease treadmill, right? Think about those 50% of teens who are overweight or obese.
And then the cascade from there.
It cascades. So that those kids, were popping statins like crazy in high school now. So they're on a statin, they have high cholesterol. They're on metformin, they have high blood sugar. Now Ozempic's being pushed on them. They're not hearing to, be incentivized to have better habits. It's a statin deficiency, it's an Ozempic deficiency. The guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics that sets the standard of care for pediatric care, wholly funded by pharma. They said obesity is genetic. That's literally what they said. They said Ozempic for 12-year-olds isn't something to do after diet interventions fail. It should be an aggressive intervention for the first sign of obesity. It's a lifetime drug. It's a lifetime injection on the package. So these groups have totally been co-opted.
So do you think that the solution then is children? Or that's the bottom up. Top down is pharmaceutical, right? They're the biggest funders of everything. So is there a way to even take them down from the top?
Well, let's get back to your point about the two parties. What I think we have, and I think people are waking up to, is that these corporate incentives have basically created an Overton window where both parties, it's like you can't really go outside of like basically a corporatist. You can't really question the standard of care for healthcare. You were punished by both sides for asking questions about COVID. Joe Rogan, for saying maybe COVID's related to exercise and eating healthy and maybe you can be healthier, was attacked by the bipartisan elites. So you have that.
It's just the flu now.
Yeah.
I know that's shocking news to everyone, but it's considered just the flu now.
Yeah.
Even though...
Which everyone was saying, and they were attacked as enemy. Anyone that said that on a podcast was enemy number one and a threat to the country. So what I think's happening is, frankly, with Trump, for better or worse, you've got a situation where he blew up Republican orthodoxy. He wasn't part of the Republican Party. He was saying things that were totally sacrilegious to Republican orthodoxy. You have RFK now as the most popular politician in America among independents and women. Actually the most popular independent politician of the past 100 years.
Yeah. The only
American
other one that ever
history.
comes to name is Ross Perot.
Yeah, but doing better polling than Ross Perot ever hit. So and resonating extremely strongly. So I think what's happening is you've got the American people gravitating to candidates who are just calling BS on the existing system. What I'd say, and what I'm trying to do as far as solutions, and this just gets really tactically into what I'm seeing in DC, is that the pharmaceutical companies and the food companies have specific areas they just hammer on. So if there's any issue of like changing nutrition guidelines to not recommend sugar, the nutrition guidelines today in America suggest 10% added sugar to every 2-year-old and up. Say it's okay to have your added sugar in your diet, 2 years old and up. If you try to, change that, they pound you with the studies. They say you're being anti-science. They come in targeted. What this community has to do, this community that really is upset about this devil's bargain, upset about our kids getting sick, upset about the breakdown of institutions that are basically incentivized for us to be in fear, addicted, sicker, more depressed, like who are starting to put these pieces together that RFK, frankly, Trump is talking about a little bit, about this breakdown of institutions. You've got to focus on targeted issues. That's what I'm trying to do. You've got to go in and lobby and marshal grassroots support. Money is one thing, but grassroots support does matter. The fact that so many moms are pissed off about what's happening does matter. You need to marshal that to specific issues.
You saw that with the vaccine, is that when it was adults, it's like, as soon as they came for the kids, people went crazy.
So I think the kids, the framework of kids, the framework that it is clearly is a moral failure. The childhood obesity rate is inexcusable. It's 3% in Japan, 3%. Okay, it's more than 50% lower in almost every European country than it is in the United States. It is an absolute moral crime that's happening, and it's simple why it's happening. It's poisoning kids. So marshaling from a political perspective that anger, that rightful anger about what's happening to kids, and then translating that into specific outcomes that you can then marshal and say, not just, and I'll be honest with you, when I go in, I've met with 50 members of Congress in the past year. When I go in and talk high level, like frankly we are now, I think that's very important for podcasts. And then when you do it with a member of Congress, they are highly engaged. They're, I've cried with them, like literally about what's happening to kids, but there's not something they can do. What we're working on is taking that anger and marshaling the grassroots support into specific things to do. For instance, how do you attack incentives? With the stroke of a pen tomorrow, the president can cut the ability of pharmaceutical companies to advertise on mainstream media. That was an executive order, one stroke of a pen by Reagan. And we're the only country in the world, along with New Zealand slightly, that allows it. We're the only country in the world that allows pharmaceutical companies to advertise on the news. We were talking to Tucker about, and he being in the news for a long time, didn't fully even realize this and appreciate this. The importance of that is not that it's getting to consumers. It's not that these goofy drug ads are impacting consumers. It's that because pharma pays 60% of TV news funding's bills, they're able to buy the news itself. So Tucker talked about self-censoring that he saw all over the place.
Oh, even the narratives that get promoted on the
when
news?
Your bills are paid
you literally own the
60%
network,
by
essentially.
one. You don't. There's no memo needed.
So like, hey, you that are writing the script, writing for prompter. Like maybe, however it gets to the prompter, this is what you're going to talk about.
You're not going to talk about the root cause of diabetes. You're not going to talk about that we need to reverse obesity. You're going to talk about Ozempic.
Don't cut off the hand that feeds you, right?
Exactly. So when you look at the news, 60 Minutes is a great example. Literally, Novo Nordisk and other drug companies, before and after a segment on Ozempic, ran. It's the number one advertiser, Pharma, for 60 Minutes, the top news program. And they ran a segment without questioning it, saying obesity is a brain disease. There's groundbreaking new research. It's genetic. And they had a Harvard doctor saying, throw willpower, throw diet, throw lifestyle out the window. This is a medical problem, and it needs to be addressed with a medical solution. They ran that. That's what the New York Times is running. That's what CNN is running. That's what MSNBC is running. The community here trying to talk about this, trying to talk about maybe if we have an obesity crisis, we shouldn't be lunging to inject every kid in the country, but instead fix our food supply. That message is resonating strongly on independent media, not to be seen on CNN, not to be seen on the mainstream. So getting back to the policy, one stroke of a pen, you can dramatically change the incentives of our information sources. With one stroke of a pen, you can change conflicts of interest rules. Just something that I still can't get my head over. If you trace conflicts of interest of NIH grants, 80% have a conflict of interest. 80% of NIH grants go to a professor at a school that's also getting grants or some payments from the pharmaceutical companies that are creating drugs for the condition that they're getting a grant to research on. With a stroke of a pen, you could have a simple statement and say, we're not cutting NIH funding, but it's going to go to core research and not going to go to professors with conflicts of interest who are incentivized to basically create more pharmaceutical solutions instead of actually solving the condition. You can do that tomorrow. You can change the shameful guidance, literally the guidance of the USDA that it's cool and recommended for 2-year-olds to eat added sugar. The second you change that guidance with the stroke of a pen, it impacts school lunch guidelines. It impacts, anywhere the government.
Well, how do you think these politicians got into power?
Again,
I mean, you have to look at where the money goes, right? You got to look at, and I'm not accusing, I'm just saying, politics is expensive, running for office is expensive, and many of them are career politicians. There's so few that just drop in. Like, I think that's where Trump comes in as being such a disruptor, is because this wasn't his whole path. But, when you think about like who's making the decisions and who's able to say, like, with the stroke of a pen, I can change this rule, you got to think, why won't they? And you got to wonder if they're in on it too. Or have they been in on it?
Without getting into the politics, and it's obviously a very charged environment in 2024. From that perspective, it's somewhat encouraging to me what we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing, Biden kind of, I would say, the representation of the establishment of that way of thinking.
You think Big Pharma could do a better job of waking him up, right? You think Big Pharma is actually doing themselves a disservice that they can't get him to speak with, articulate anything, to not fall over. Yeah,
I think they're
dig
happy.
deep, Big Pharma.
There's not aggressive action happening right now over there against Big Pharma, but yeah, I mean, he's getting, I think in a three-way race, he's at 27%. So it's like there's certainly, all the rest of the vote is going to two candidates who are, whatever you think of them, calling for like mass disruption. And I think the American people would agree, like, not totally tied to the status quo. And that's my other point when I'm working with or trying to influence lawmakers is like, their big takeaway is that it's not as direct corruption. There is a lot of direct corruption of throwing money around, but the environment they're in is so that Overton window, the parameters of decisions they can make are so confined that the uniparty thing, like they're actually playing a game that's designed by powers much bigger than the two parties, and they're not able to change it. They feel trapped within that system. What I think RFK and Trump, quite frankly, have the power to do is just change that window that people operate in. The president has to do it. Congress is so beholden to their individual constituency special interests. But what a president could do, and what I hope a president does, is say, healthcare isn't about changing Medicare law slightly. It's not about Medicaid slightly. It's not even about Medicare for all or free market. We have to fundamentally change the incentives of healthcare, where the institutions aren't incentivized for us to be sick.
Right.
You actually are.
How does
you
that
actually
work?
are playing the. And I tell you, the pharma lobbyists want us to be debating basically how to provide care better. We're literally, the healthcare debate is how do we provide better access to a system instead of acknowledging that system itself is broken. It's the definition of insanity.
Well, like, you need to not need the system.
Yeah.
You need to not get more money so that you can spend it on, medicines of sorts or drugs. You need to figure out how to not need the system. Like, we don't need acute health care. We need maintenance health care. We need the daily health care, which is where I met your sister, which was with the CGM, with the continuous blood glucose monitor. And I was so interested in learning about, myself. And look, I'm not coming down on anyone that's, a little bit overweight. Like, one of my big motivations to be so deep in the health world was because I had my own challenges, but it was merely a reflection of other things going on. It shouldn't have been the way it was for me, but I had to solve them. One of which is how I met Casey, was with levels, and learned so much through that. But that's a daily reminder constantly through the day. What is my blood sugar at? What is it doing? What does it do when I eat this? Like, once we learn how to have a daily healthcare regimen so that we don't need acute health care or we don't need continuous statins or lifelong drugs. Look, I'm grateful for the medical system to be able to put an arm back on, or, get in a car accident and be able to survive that and be able to do brain surgery. That is amazing. But what we don't need is people that are led there and slowly die every day because they're on something that is merely band-aiding what's really going on.
Yeah, and something we were talking about before we started is trust yourself, not your doctor. That's a chapter in our book. And I want to unpack this. I think it's really important because Casey and I were both defenders of the medical system. What does everyone say? Well, there's been so many miracles. Life expectancy's doubled. I think it's really important to unpack this. And what we have, our thesis is it's really about chronic versus acute. So if you can name a medical miracle, a lot of what you just mentioned, emergency surgical procedures, making sure you don't die if you have some traumatic incident with brain surgery and
an allergic reaction with an injection, right? Beautiful. Although those things should be a lot cheaper because they expire and everything. That's some bullshit right there. But why is that so expensive?
That's going to kill you. An infection, a complicated childbirth. It used to be more dangerous 100 years ago for a woman to give birth than have breast cancer today. It was like I think it was 2% death rate. It was like the most dangerous thing a human being could do is give birth. These things are miracles. But what we have to understand is that was until 1960, okay? And actually the first chronic disease treatment ever was the birth control pill. So until the birth
God damn them.
until the birth control pill, there was never in American history a drug that you took recurring. You took pills quickly, like antibiotic. So what happened post-World War II, when medical advancements, penicillin was credited with winning the war, and medical trust was at its highest, actually people involved with the Sackler family and other not great people saw the birth control pill, and it was a light off. We can get people to take pills forever. And the first pill in the 60s that was the blockbuster chronic disease treatment was Valium, and then into the 70s, and Time magazine said Valium Nation. 30% of women in the United States in the 70s were taking Valium.
Oh, wow.
It was called like Mama's Little Helper.
And
they ran very sexist ads, like, oh, if your husband's giving you trouble, just pop a Valium. So they got the whole, and then it was SSRIs, and then it was just a cascading of all of these
companies getting in on it. They got to have their own drug.
And then it's like, okay, LDL, there's some research on that, stat. So so it's just this cascading amount. Till today, 90% plus of medical spending is chronic. It was close to 0% in 1960. So we've shifted all medical attention to something that, as you mentioned, should never be part of the doctor's office.
Right.
Chronic disease, again, diabetes, obesity, kidney disease, heart disease, these are not things that are solved in the doctor's office. But we've pumped the $4.7 trillion to those conditions and basically taken this well-deserved trust from the medical system on acute and asked them to trust them on chronic. The greatest mistake, I would argue, in American history, certainly in American medical history, was that. It's that we've trusted the system on chronic. Our point in the book is you should listen to your doctor when your pediatrician's talking to your child about, obesity or what to eat, or you're put on the statin with the borderline numbers or the metformin or all these things. You should listen. The doctor does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. We cannot get much worse than we are right now, where the more statins we prescribe, the more heart disease goes up, the more metformin we prescribe, the more diabetes goes up, the more SSRIs we prescribe, the more suicide and depression goes up. We've literally never had a chronic disease treatment in American history that's lowered the rate of the chronic diseases it's trying to treat.
And metformin is a form of Ozempic.
Metformin is one of the 3 most prescribed drugs in the country for prediabetes and diabetes.
Okay.
So
kind of, because what it does is lowers blood sugar.
It's similar.
Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, or like there's a whole bunch of them now, but metformin is a form of that.
So it's different than a GLP-1.
Okay.
It's a pill. It's a similar. So the ones you just mentioned are the injectable GLP-1 agonists.
Okay.
Metformin's been around for a while.
Okay.
And if you have any type of high blood sugar, you're going to get popped that metformin very quickly.
Okay.
It's just generic. Like I think there's well over 100 million prescriptions of metformin and statins. So those are kind of the treadmill. Now we've got Mounjaro.
Yeah, let's talk
Wegovy,
about that for a second, because it's the most prescribed drug right now, right? Aren't the GLP-1 agonists, they're the most prescribed drug in the country?
I haven't even heard that, but they might be getting close to it right now. It's a Novo Nordisk, the main company that makes these drugs, has just passed LVMH, the luxury fashion company, as the most valuable company in Europe.
Oh wow! They used to be the biggest company too, right? I feel like they're the big LVMH.
Of course, they're a massive company, obviously iconic European company. Now
they own like Dom Perignon and everything.
Now the largest company in Europe is a company in Denmark that makes 90% of their profits from U.S. consumers. This Ozempic is not
90 from the U.S. 90% from the U.S.
They charge 10 times more for Ozempic and Wegovy than they do in Denmark. And in Denmark and throughout the EU, when folks are having obesity, do you know what they do? They actually pay for people to go on the keto diet. People that are diabetic, they have food as medicine interventions, and they actually subsidize a keto diet. They have programs with their medical budget that subsidize exercise. In Europe, when you are dealing with moderate obesity, they're not paying for Ozempic. They're not paying for Wegovy. They're the same thing.
Right.
They're actually implementing sane policies. I was in Denmark, right outside the Novo Nordisk headquarters last year. Everyone's biking. Their food isn't poisoned. They have bipartisan consensus on their childcare, diet regulations. They have food as medicine programs when you have obesity. They subsidize a keto diet or diabetes. That's what they're doing in Europe. They're laughing at us. They are laughing at us. They are taking advantage of a corrupt U.S. system where we are on the verge, again, recently in Capitol Hill, there's hundreds of Congress members who are sponsoring a bill paid for by Novo Nordisk that's making Ozempic coverable by taxpayer money, by Medicare and Medicaid, at the moment someone's overweight or obese. So the target market, the reason it's such a valuable company, I'm not concerned with the extremely obese diabetic person. A lot of people bring up, I have no comment on that. I'm worried about the middle American, the median American. That drug is being targeted for taxpayer funding for the average American. The average American is obese. And that's going to cost $15,000 per patient per year. That's the reason it's such a valuable company, is because it's going to be the biggest, most successful drug in history from US taxpayers, from our budget. And my point on Ozempic is, if there's ever a time to ask, are we going to continue going down the chronic disease treadmill, or are we going to take that $15,000 that we're about to pay and say, what can we do with that $15,000? What can we do with $3,000 a year to attack obesity?
What fixes this
Can
at a
we shift
fundamental
our
level?
farming system to regenerative farming? Can we invest in more technology
Right.
to get off this monocropping system, as we talked about?
Right.
We have 40 crop cycles left. Our soil's getting so depleted.
Right.
So I can tell you one thing, it would be a lot less than $15,000 per obese person. And the fact that we don't put those puzzle pieces together is a huge problem. So that's why I believe that Ozempic is one of the most important, actually, issues in the country from a societal.
Because it's come in to distract. It's come in to take money and put it into another pharma company, as opposed to the potential of those dollars to go into actually fundamentally fixing the problem.
It's projected over $1 trillion over the next 10 years. And again, I don't care if our friends are taking it, if somebody, but it is on track to be the standard of care.
So do you think the drug itself is actually dangerous?
Yeah, so I think high level, if you have a dirty fish tank, clean the tank, don't drug the fish. It's a bad public policy to be subsidizing that drug instead of fixing our food system, number one. So even if the drug was perfect, it's not right. It's a disaster of a drug. So I think this really gets into the corruption of
in what ways?
Well, let's just back up. So when you have a peer-reviewed study, the company does it and they're able to determine the questions, and then the board that's approving it at the FDA, it's not FDA bureaucrats, they're outside experts who are able to be paid for by the company itself. So literally, like the opioids, So you have actually a board of obesity medicine specialists who need this drug to be approved because it creates lifelong patients for their clinics, and that's what they're all depending on. So what did you have? For children, you're on track for approval based on a 68-week study. A 68-week study for a lifetime drug. The study for children and adults did not even look at muscle mass. So they're able to design the study, which does signify in the study significant side effects, including 30% of the people having to go off the drug because they had such terrible gastrointestinal issues. But it did not even note that a huge portion of people in the study actually became technically fatter because their muscle mass was so depleted. This is becoming a huge issue. Muscle is our glucose sponge. If we don't have muscle, we are guaranteed to have many other comorbidities and metabolic dysfunction.
Wrote a book about how muscle is the organ of longevity.
So it's actually
Forever
amazing.
Strong.
It's a great book. That's clear. If your muscle depletes, you're almost signing a contract for diabetes, heart disease.
And you're also tanking your metabolism.
Right.
Your metabolism is directly correlated with the amount of muscle you have, because muscle is expensive and burns at a much higher metabolic rate than fat. So if you lose muscle, you're not only getting fatter, but then you're also, now you really can't eat. You really can't eat because you get fat.
100%. So that was not even taken into account in the approval studies. It is so pronounced and the muscle loss is so bad, the industry isn't even arguing it. Now, when they go on panels, they're saying, well, of course, there needs to be aggressive exercise interventions. And actually what they're saying on panels is you need to exercise 6 times a week aggressively to keep up your muscle mass. So let's just back this up. If you're exercising,
they wouldn't be fat in the first place if they did that.
Exactly. There's not an epidemic of obesity among people exercising 6 times a week. I guarantee you.
No. You can be 15, 20 pounds overweight, okay, but you're never going to be 100 pounds overweight if you work out 6 times a week.
So they're actually doing like clinics and like, gyms, and it's like an urgent thing that you have. Exactly. There's not, if you're exercising 6 times a week, right? So that's what they're already admitting, and then it's incongruous with what the Harvard doctors and a lot of the folks are saying, is that it's not a matter of exercise or lifestyle. It's just you need the. So the argument is totally falling apart. But yeah, the muscle mass depletion is a huge problem. The other thing I just mentioned real quick, and this gets the lack of, and the really core point of the book is that we silo the body. When Casey graduated from medical school, she chose between one of 42 medical specialties to devote the rest of her life to. She was focused on a couple millimeters of the face, head and neck surgeon. What Ozempic does, let's just think about it. I call it injectable anorexia, which it really is, but it does that by attacking the gut. The Ozempic is gut dysfunction. And well, what is your gut? What is your microbiome? It actually produces 95% of your serotonin. So, if you notice, if you have stomach issues or IBS, I'm starting to notice this, or any type of gastrointestinal issue, I notice it now. I feel more depressed. There was a drug in the 90s that upset the microbiome, and it led to mass suicides. If you change your
antibiotics, number one problem with them, it
100%.
Wrecks the gut biome.
It wrecks the gut and leads to a lot of mental health issues. So that's just like clear, right? Like your gut is the arbiter of your hormones that regulate your mental health. So we're giving this and pushing on teens now.
So does it actually change the composition, like as far as chemically, or is it just more it slows down the emptying, like
it
in the
changes
muscle
chemically,
function?
and there's been pushing on this, and they literally say they don't know how it changes the microbiome and don't fully know.
Oh.
But it slows down your digestion, but there's unknown metabolic and microbiome impacts. They've actually, when pushed, do not even know. So it's causing gut dysfunction. It's causing so much gastrointestinal function that even when people have it on insurance, 30% of people go off of it within the first couple months. And it's leading to a massive increase in depression and suicidal ideation, so pronounced that the EU is now investigating links to suicidal ideation and has now stated the EU is very tough on Ozempic, right? They're not making money over in the EU. Right? They're buying off people here. Novo Nordisk, this Danish company, is one of the top individual 10 spenders on media ads. They're one of the top 10 contributors individually to US politicians. This Danish company is absolutely buying off everybody. They've made 400,000 payments, 400,000 individual payments to doctors last year. 400,000. This is on a government database. We're letting it ride here because it'll just continue the pharmaceutical chronic disease treadmill. They're putting their foot down in Europe, saying that there's actually a massive increase in suicidal ideation from this drug, which of course, right, our body's connected to, our microbiome's connected to many other things.
You can't separate
so
any
none
of it, really.
we had doctors from Harvard who had, direct payments, consulting payments, not research, bribes, and then their entire practice is predicated on having recurring patients. This is a very good drug for their practice. They're getting research grants. They're creating the studies. Panels at the FDA who are also paid are approving the studies. The media, who's paid, is cheerleader. I mean, you're anti-science if you go against this. So that's how the rigging in the institutions works. It's happening extremely well for a very problematic drug.
We're just not getting clear information because everybody's paid off.
Yeah.
Is one of the biggest problems, it seems like, because we can appreciate some medicines for some things, and I think there's definitely got to be concern anytime something is recommended for life. That's a cause for concern in and of itself. But just having someone that's actually able to authentically, objectively research these things seems like it shouldn't be far-fetched for us to deserve as human beings from these companies.
This is why I think what we're dealing with at the end of the day is a spiritual crisis. Like I think these interests are kind of bashing us over the head not to ask like fundamental questions about like interconnectedness in our bodies.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Ask us not to trust ourselves.
I mean, I was just thinking about the emotional correlation between our health and that. And we were just sent into the deepest spiral of emotional disruption and lack of connection that the world has maybe ever seen through COVID. And so not only is there like biological warfare happening, but there's psychological warfare happening on us now. And I'd love to hear your experience and what your sister has to say, and just, you know, what your guys' thoughts are around our emotions. And we have the highest level of depression these days, and through, whether it's through drugs or whether it's just from social media or the news or things happening in the world. But talk about the correlation between just our emotions and how we're feeling in our body and what's going on.
Yeah, so my sister and I were spending a lot of time together during COVID. We're very different and weren't even that close, but really started becoming closer during COVID, and I really started learning from her on why she left medicine. I mean, I thought she was dumb to leave medicine after 11 years of training. You know, we were very success driven. You know, getting all the plaudits, and she really helped radicalize me. And around that time during COVID, my mom, as I said, you know, got cancer abruptly. We went to her side, and to me, it's cemented because she's the American story. You know, she for 40 years, you know, just, oh, it's fine, you know, high cholesterol statin, you know, high blood sugar metformin. It was just this cascading over the 40 years. And she, you know, instead of those symptoms being gifts, instead of, and this is where I think the spiritual gets in, instead of, you know, talking about what does that high triglycerides, low HDL, burgeoning waistline, what does that mean for what's happening inside of her body? What does that mean for her cells? What are her cells telling her? What does this mean for later on? She was never sent on that path of curiosity until a couple of years before death, when Casey awakened, and it was so gratifying. And actually my mom and her dying in the final days, two things really stood out. One is she was reading notes from hundreds and hundreds of people about how she impacted their lives, and had such a look of gratification on her face, and just like how she impacted all these people. And then she also had stacks of book on metabolic health from all these leaders that have influenced us. And after she died, my sister, we were talking about this earlier, and you know, my sister and I were raised really conservative, never drugs, nothing. And somebody recommended we do psychedelics, which I was really skeptical of, but I'm like, my mom just died, I'm a little unhappy. So, and it helped solidify, I just kept thinking about that image about my mom and all the people she impacted. And it solidified for me and my sister this experience of just like this image of just like literally we're carrying her on. She lives within us. It's trite, but it's like really, really true. And it really like deeply felt. And like Casey talked about how she, actually biologically, everybody she's met and on us, she actually changed our cells. Like when you meet someone and have an interaction with someone, you actually like literally like change their composition of their body. And we had this discussion about how she's like living in composition with their body. And you know, so there's some sadness that she should have been awakened on that path earlier, like awakened on the interconnectedness, awakened on, you know, this idea that
your sister?
No, we're sad that my mom wasn't awoken on this interconnectedness, this idea of like all of her metabolic issues being tied together. So there's some sadness there, but there was like real, like my sister and I through this experience when we were dealing with some mental health challenges after my mom's death helped facilitate this natural, you know, intervention, helped facilitate these ideas, which is another way we're kind of being, I think, gaslighted by, you know, a mental health industry that kind of tries to keep us numb from reality instead of face it. We, during this experience, were really emboldened, and truly like in 4 hours.
Can I ask what you did? What was
we
your...
did like a high dose of psilocybin, kind of what Johns Hopkins does when they test psilocybin.
They usually go pretty high. It's like 8 grams. Is it that high?
It was like my first time in like
So
5, which was very.
I did 5, and that was a big one.
And so this is what Johns Hopkins is studying. The neuroscientists at Johns Hopkins said it's one of the most impactful mental health intervention they've ever experienced. One time, which is very disruptive to the pharmaceutical industry. We're fast tracking. Remember,
this isn't every day for the rest of your life.
We're fast tracking Ozempic in 68 weeks, but with the mental health and suicide epidemic, we're slow walking this because it's a one-time treatment. So a lot of stuff to unpack there, but it and this is what the research said, certainly the experience for me, it kind of helps you get above the day-to-day ski slopes that are in your mind and really see the bigger picture. What our kind of thesis that we developed, through this experience after my mom died is like, there's just this massive spiritual problem where people are suffering in all these different ways that are actually connected, and we're being lied to about the fact that we're not connected. Like depression is highly tied to diabetes and what we're eating and exercise.
Have you talked to Zach Bush before?
What's that?
Have you talked to Zach Bush before?
Who's that?
He talks about, he has a company of Farmer's Footprint, Regenerative Farming, but he was a doctor studying cancer, and he left that practice, and but he equates, we're talking, I think community and connection is something we were just talking about as far as something that's led to our mental health, that's always leads to physical health.
Right.
And that he equated cells in the body and the way that cancer behaves to human beings as well. And that when a cancer develops, it's a cell that breaks off from the group and dies or goes rogue, right? And then it's similarly in regular everyday life with human beings. If you look at us as cells, it's when the cell breaks off from the group, they do the same thing, and perhaps that's a child that ends up murdering people at a school or something like that when they're alone. And the deepest depths of our sadness can come from that being alone. And we have entered into an age where we're more connected but disconnected than ever. And I wonder how much of it is really, we could look to our telephones and technology. While it's beautiful in some ways, it's very dangerous. Just like everything works in quite big polarities. So we're, again, more connected than ever, but less in some ways. And ultimately, the goal is to be healthy. And if it's reducing our health, then we need to reassess where we're going as humanity.
I wouldn't trade, I wouldn't want to go back 150 years without our modern advancements, but there's stuff we really need to grapple with. I think the fact, I love capitalism, but there's trillions of dollars of industries that are preying on our dopamine, they're preying on our attention, they're preying on our fear. You look at a kid and they have a weapon of mass destruction for chronic stress in their pockets. There's trillions of dollars of industries basically to dysregulate their sleep and attention. There's trillions of dollars to get them addicted. And there's the biggest industry in the country wants them sick. And then there's huge motivations of those industries to kind of keep them in fear, to use fear of death as a motivator to do whatever folks say.
Or being canceled.
I think if we don't grapple with these issues, it's existential. I mean, from a budgetary standpoint, we just keep getting sicker and costs keep growing. Again, the largest and fastest growing, it's like, this isn't slowing down. It's mathematical just reality that's going to bankrupt the country.
Right.
And then we're becoming this infertile, non-competitive, again, not being hyperbolic here. It's like PCOS is exploding among women, which is a metabolic condition. Sperm counts plummeting for men.
Testosterone.
Where our bodies are crying out and literally rebelling. What could be a bigger warning sign that we're losing our ability to reproduce?
Right.
I really am concerned that we're going to be infertile.
The universe is saying it's not a safe place anymore. And 100%. I look at the things that motivate me the most to want to get engaged and try and do anything is that I can take a back seat and kind of live my life, and I'm fortunate enough that I have the means to do that in a way that I want. And I don't have to be a servant to any system. But when they're poisoning our food and when they're flying up above and poisoning our skies that lands on everything, including the air that I breathe, I'm pissed off now. I'm so sick of looking up to the sky and seeing chemtrails all over the place. And I'm so sick of thinking about, if I lived in Europe, I can eat whatever I want. I feel great and I don't gain weight. And that is, I'm being a little bit absurd about the anything, but it's far better than here. I did it. I was there for 6 weeks last year, and I drank every day. I drank wine every day, and I ate pasta and pizza, and every day. And I came back lighter than when I left. And there's walking, there's little things, but generally speaking, the food is cleaner, which means your body knows what to do with it, and you're not being poisoned all day, every day, and they're not blocking out the sun. Another huge issue that I think has total relevance to our mental health.
Oh, amazing. I mean, we talked about in the book, natural or artificial light is a very new invention. It's actually 100 years, 150 years. It's like until like a couple generations ago,
Right.
it was like you were,
Right.
first of all, there's no travel.
Right.
So you had the same rhythm.
That's right.
And you were like out, like you slept. Like the sun is so important. Like we're on a 24-hour clock as humans, like evolutionarily because of the sun.
I mean, the circadian rhythm is so important.
Yeah. So kind of back to the experience and the kind of formative experience after my mom died. It's like I've never been a guy that's passionate about nutrition or the sun or looking at the sun or it's like these things sounded all fluffy to me, but it's like these are just such simple core biological needs that are under attack. Our bodies are rebelling against us. It's the most important public policy issue, I think, because just our human capital, if you want to look at it from a raw economic standpoint, we're poisoning and completely creating a non-competitive population. We're bankrupting the country. And we've been led through these incentives I saw working for the food and pharma industries to be led to believe that it's more complicated than it really is. Like, that's a key point. Like, it's so simple. It really is. And a point we really try to make is there's a huge impetus for health influencers and various people to come and explain to you how it's complicated and they have a special lens on it. It's food, it's sun, circadian rhythm,
Right.
it's chronic stress, it's sleep, it's movement. I mean, it's these basic things and doing them regularly. And obviously there's a bottoms-up revolution, but it's also these gears of our incentives. It's just like, if we can have the bottoms up, which is happening, and I'm trying to fight hard on the kind of top-down legal, regulatory policy change, we can get there. People want to have awe and curiosity for the world. Like, a 2-year-old son, he goes out in the sun, he moves, he's curious about everything. He has awe for the universe. We beat this out of people. We put kids in schools designed by John D. Rockefeller for the Industrial Revolution.
All you have to do is look at prisons versus schools, and they look identical. Schools, classrooms, cafeterias, identical. I interviewed Rick Doblin a couple weeks ago, right? And so he's been working for 40 years to get MDMA approved for therapy. 40 years.
He's a hero.
I just thought of him exactly when you said that it took 6 to 8 weeks to pass certain laws to be able to get something, regulatory passed, or just look at the vaccine, right? I mean, that thing got pushed through before it ever really had. Well, it's not really a vaccine. So, it's experimental, genetic editing drug. And these things get pushed through. And yet, on the other hand, you've got drugs like mushrooms that are natural, or even ayahuasca for that. And MDMA, which is like, these treatments are proven over and over again for decades through him. Thank God somebody's been working on it to completely transform people's lives. Over 80% have a measurable difference through their 3 treatment process that they do. I mean, it's just crazy, and it really makes you wonder about like how deep and weird and spiritual and like nefarious it gets, that they're trying to clamp down and kill our connection and our consciousness, our intuition. They're just killing it.
I want to be really clear. It's a huge passion of mine to evangelize this, and I'm really working to evangelize it on communities on the right. I think everyone needs to know this. It is one of the most important societal developments. I think maybe the most important of psychedelics and the responsible medical use of them. I think at its core, our reality is controlled by our brain. Our brain's highly impacted with our body and all these metabolic habits. But if we can change our perception and get out of this matrix that we're in and really change our own view, it's like that's the highest leverage tool we can utilize for the American people. And I think we are, through a lot of these toxins, a lot of these addictive substances, a lot of the culture, we're in this like zone. So just unlocking humans to reassess a little bit and get out of that tunnel vision.
Fight or flight.
Is existential. It's the most important thing, actually, if you believe that the brain kind of controls reality. And I think it's one of the most important societal developments. I will just say, it has been the most important thing I've ever done, more important than the death of my mom, birth of a child, getting married, because it tied that all together and really helped change my perception. And I don't know many people who have had these experiences. It hasn't had a similar impact on their lives. So I just am very evangelical about that, and it really fits to me in the root cause. It's like, oh, you're talking about healthy eating, no drugs, and then drugs. No, we need to get to the root cause. We need to get to the root cause. The root cause of depression is in an SSRI deficiency. And the SSRIs might be helpful for some people, and I'm not totally against those, but it's like that's not addressing the root cause. The root cause is our framework and our underlying trauma. Anything that can help get to that is really important. And it's just like food. The food fuels our cells and our body, and I think it's a spiritual and moral crisis that we're detached from our soil and our food. So I just want to say that, and you know, anyone, I just try to say that to everyone, particularly people who, you know, what are you talking about, psychedelics? It's like, I think there really are, maybe not actual people, although Nixon did literally say we need to ban psychedelics because people are asking too many questions about the Vietnam War. That's literally what he said.
Really?
He said people are waking up too much. No, they were totally legal, huge research coming out, and they were banned. There's leaked a recording of him with the generals saying people are thinking for themselves too much. That's why they banned them. And then they did any U.S. research budget with any other country had to ban them as well. So overnight, 200 countries banned them because the U.S. tied any research partnerships to it. So there was top down, like people are thinking for themselves too much.
Wow.
And I think there's an invisible hand that doesn't want people to wake up, that doesn't want people. Right. A study just came out saying that it's environmentally negligent to farm your own food, and you have to buy.
Environmentally negligent?
No, it says 6 times worth. A study from Michigan Nutrition School, or University of Michigan, saying it's much worse than the environment to cook your own food. Like people don't like. There's forces at play that do not want us to take autonomy over ourselves.
Well, this goes to one of the themes that's come up as far as what the powers to be want from us, which is total control. They want us to own nothing, and they want us to be happy about it. So it sounds like they don't even want us to own a stove. That's
right. I mean, instead of talking about what's being cooked on the stove, we're getting big news things about what type of stove it is. They're like banning gas stoves, and we're missing the point.
I think maybe we could sort of close up with something I found interesting that you had in here, and the six laws that could be passed tomorrow that would change American health. And I think just mentioning those would be really huge, just to give people calls to action. And I'd just love to hear who you think, given that 2024 is going to be such a huge year in politics and such a pivotal year on who we elect. Well, I guess that's assuming we're actually going to have some power over that and it's not going to be manipulated. But who would be the best president for this job?
Asking the easy questions there. I'll fit them into a framework of 3 things, tangible things that we need to do. So we need to stop subsidizing toxic food. So I'm not calling for a ban on anything. I'm a libertarian, as I said. I don't think Coke should be banned. But when you add up the incentives of how us as taxpayers fund ultra-processed food, it's over $100 billion a year. Again, $70 billion from food stamps to ultra-processed food. No other country in the world with their low-income nutrition program feeds addictive processed poison to their population that then causes trillions of dollars of downstream health effects. It's crazy. Agriculture subsidies, 95% go to ultra-processed food. We actually, as a country, subsidize cigarettes more than fruits and vegetables with agriculture subsidies. Not a joke. Through legacy incentives for the tobacco industry, more money from the federal treasury goes to subsidize tobacco than all fruits and vegetables combined. Totally backwards system that incentivizes ultra-processed food, which is much more profitable, shelf-stable. Oh, yeah. There aren't massive broccoli companies. There are big ultra-processed
As a slight indication as to what you maybe shouldn't eat, because I've been in this world and experienced it, is that those that have the money to advertise generally have gigantic margins, and it's probably not the healthiest of things. I was paid by Coke. I was sponsored by Coke. I was a Coca-Cola Racing Family driver, and I knew I did a deal with the devil. I was like, I don't drink this, and I know that people knew that I didn't drink that probably, but I still did it, and I took the money. Like I was sponsored by Hostess for Ding Dongs and Twinkies and I mean,
you've got every top athlete. You've got every top athlete on the Super Bowl, right? It's like all these.
I've done it.
Yeah, well,
and so if they have the money to pay you crazy money to say I do this, is probably a reason. You know, when the companies that I wanted to sponsor me didn't sponsor anyone or anything.
Like a pasture-raised meat, you know, they don't have the budget.
You know,
the farmers, right?
I know. So
well, that's fascinating.
So that's just my sort of anecdotal experience on like as a navigation tool for what you're buying is like. Look, if there's advertisements, be a little cautious. You know?
Yeah.
Not for everything, but it's not a bad guideline.
They rig the system. They make the food addictive, and they rig the system, make it very cheap and shelf stable. It's more profitable. They have more money to fuel that, 100%. So we need to stop subsidizing. So overnight, we could just change these subsidies. In addition, and the last one I'll mention is the school choice, or excuse me, the federal school lunch program is one of the top sources of calories for kids. No nutrition guidelines whatsoever. Michelle Obama was actually right. She actually totally got bought off and stopped talking about food after the first year. But when she was doing the whole healthy food pitch, she was right. That needs to be the president, the secretary of treasury, and the secretary of defense, because this is a national security issue. Only 20% of 21-year-olds are able to join the military because the rest are not medically.
They physically can't pass the test.
So okay. Stop subsidizing food. Stop recommending poisonous food. We talked about the USDA guidelines that recommend added sugar for 2 years and up. The president should convene the head of the NIH, the head of Harvard Med School, Dr. Fauci, whoever wants to come. They should stand before Congress and they should say we should go through all of our standards. We're libertarian, we're conservative, whatever, what have you. It's not conservative, it's not liberal, it's not anything to be recommending bad food. The USDA recently did a study that said it's healthy for kids to have a diet 91% in ultra-processed food. They literally wrote this report.
That's such bullshit.
We need clarity, leadership, day one, that we're not going to recommend, that we're going to get to a more whole food, not ultra-processed food. This all changes.
If the sun doesn't grow your food, shouldn't be eating it very much.
This is a key thing.
The sun is energy.
It's not complicated. We're at close to 65% ultra-processed food consumption in the United States. Japan's below 20%. If we got down to 20 or 30%, just that statistic, just if we had a national effort to stop recommending and stop, medical leaders to put a lower emphasis on ultra-processed food, if we got down to 20 or 30%, trillions of dollars saved, human capital unleashed, mental health, huge improvements. So stop recommending the ultra-processed food. And then the third one I just reiterate is like we need to just go after how they rig the system. So I mentioned the media one. I mean, that should be signed day one, where we ban pharma ads on TV, so don't allow them.
Yep.
I'll just close by saying, and this is getting really nitty gritty, but I think it's important, is I'm a huge fan of HSA FSAs. There are these tax-free dollars that generally people use to buy drugs. There's $150 billion in these accounts. It's 80%.
What do they stand for? I don't know.
So health savings accounts.
Okay.
So this is why companies attacking TrueMed, but 80% of the country.
And TrueMed is who you're working with.
Yeah, that's my company.
Your company is TrueMed.
So 80% of Americans, when they choose their health insurance, can elect to put money into account, a health savings account.
Okay.
And there's a lot of money in it. There's $150 billion. It's generally for qualified medical expenses. It is for qualified medical expenses, which generally people think are drugs once they're sick. So people don't optimize it.
So it's your own money.
It's your own money.
Put your own money in an HSA.
Tax-free, so it's pre-tax. So it's like your 40, 50, 30%, whatever your tax rate is savings. And it could be like $8,000+ a year per family. What my company, TrueMed, is doing is writing letters recommending exercise, food, supplements for people dealing with chronic conditions. You can actually use that money, the tax-free money, to buy your healthy groceries, to buy your CrossFit membership, to personal training, whatever. That's just a simple tactical example. That's the public policy we need. We need doctors, instead of writing scripts for all these drugs, to actually, they can write, and our company's doing it, but I have a message for every single doctor. Write a letter of medical necessity for exercise that unlocks actual medical spending on exercise.
Train people to work out instead of take a pill. Train
and
people
can buy, if they're dealing with prediabetes, obesity, depression, they can buy their gym membership tax-free, like a 30 to 40% savings. So we can shift money to that. So our company, we've worked with 100,000 patients the past 3 months. We've written 100,000 facilitated independent providers, writing 100,000 letters of medical necessity for people facing metabolic conditions. And we've saved them over $100 million of tax-free money going to actual metabolic healthy items. But that's the big thing. It's like we've got to take that $4.5+ trillion of the medical budget. That needs to go to exercise. That needs to go to healthy food. That needs to go to supplementation. 95% of it right now goes to people after they're sick to manage disease. But that's one thing we're doing with HSA is letters of medical necessity, so you can buy your exercise with medical dollars.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So.
And who for president? You skipped over.
Oh
that
gosh,
one.
I'm trying to.
Come on.
Oh man,
I mean, it could be obviously very narrow in this window that we're talking about, right? There's a lot of roles that need to be filled, but as far as like who would be the best advocate for helping our food industry, Big Pharma stop doing what they're doing, the quality of food, government regulations on what companies are able to do to manipulate the system.
You're getting into hot water here, but let me say this: I am hell bent and singularly focused on changing the incentives of healthcare along the lines we've been talking about. There are two candidates kind of in the main running right now who've made statements. I think it's a historical development how strongly RFK has resonated on exactly the issues, much better articulated than I can, that we're talking about right now, about how we're fundamentally being poisoned and have a corrupt healthcare system. Donald Trump has also made some very strong statements actually in the past couple months. If you go down on Instagram, he made a statement about children's health, and he said, as one of my first actions as president, I'm going to put a halt to what's going on. We're going to do a massive investigation. Why is autism going up amongst kids? Why is autoimmune conditions going up? Why is fatty liver disease? Why are all these problems happening all at once to kids? I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to look at environmental toxins. I'm going to look at food. I'm going to look at pharmaceutical. So he's actually made, if you just heard it, you wouldn't know whether it's RFK or him. He's made some very strong statements. And I will say that they're among all voters, but there's real resonance on that issue. Yeah. And those are the two candidates right now who have said some very strong statements. So I'm gonna punt on your question a little bit, but I would commend, this is the issue I care about, I would commend those two candidates on bold statements.
I appreciate that. That was articulated very well.
What about you?
Don't you find, I'll answer as best first, I think RFK, I think Bobby would probably do the best job to navigate the stuff that we talked about. Don't you find it fascinating that the Democratic Party comes from more of a background of like freedom to do what you want, to be have your own sovereignty for various different things, to, quality food and all of that. Like it feels like, and again, I'm not super political, but that's more of the background of that party. 100%. Yet there's no peep out, just.
It's the uniparty. It's the uniparty system.
Fascinating.
It's the uniparty system. I think voters are still there, but we have, for some reason,
less government.
It's a political. No, voters on the left still. They don't like what's happening to their kids. Yeah. They don't like what's happening to pharma. I think we have this complete co-opting of the left by the pharmaceutical industry. I would have never expected it. I will make one prediction. I know we both talked to Tucker recently. I'm very impressed with how he's convening conversations too on these important issues, and I know sees this issue really clearly. I'll make a prediction. I think he's going to be vice president.
Do you?
That's my. I'm just getting that. We can delete it if it doesn't happen. But I just want to get that on the record. I think he'd be a good one. He's got a core.
Oh God,
he's got a core. He's got a core sense of beliefs, very strong. He's an incredible communicator, which is vital in democracy, and he has a network of incredible people.
Yeah.
And a great, I think, eye for filtering out swampy people. So I just, that's just a one prediction I'll make.
That. I mean, I totally agree with you. I think it's less about would he be qualified and more about would he do it, because he's, when I talked to him, it was like that it was not what he wanted to do. But let's just say if this does happen, the coercive capabilities of whoever gets him, which I would imagine would be Donald Trump, because that's who he's in favor of, would be pretty impressive, because I didn't get the impression like he had any intention of wanting to do it at all.
Yeah. Well, it's a consequential year, and I'm excited to hear what's happening and just appreciate you convening this conversation. I think this issue is really picking up and very important.
This is the most motivating sort of component of what made me get into politics at all, was that I'm like, I can't ignore these problems that you poison everything I do now, the air I breathe and the food I eat, and I'm over it. I can't run away from this anymore. So, way to go. I love it. I'm on board. Thank you for president.
Oh, no. I know that's a push for. I think
I'm excited to see where your road takes you. I'm so excited you're speaking out about these issues and just
Thanks.
admire you so
Let's
much.
hold up the book. I want to hold this book up. Yeah, perfect. Great. I love that. And I just love that your sister's Casey. Like, I was like, oh my God, that's your sister. Hang on a second.
I'm the small
Oh.
print here, but Casey's my hero, and it was amazing working on this with her.
That's so cool. What an awesome thing. Congrats. Thanks everybody for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.